My name is Jabari Holloway. I am an English teacher. I've been teaching English for about 4 years or so. It's my second profession. And so when Steph asked me to speak about silence, I thought it was a really interesting opportunity because to do my job well, I found I have to be quiet and listen, right? So the topic, the title of this presentation is "The Sound of Silence," not to be cliche or anything, and underneath it, subcaption: "A dualistic approach to non-duality." Okay, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, so dualistic, adjective. We know it's adjective by. So again, being an English teacher, I'll be approaching a lot of them talking about through words. And what these words actually mean. These expressions, this way in which we communicate with each other. So dualistic. Got it. Alright. So two. Suffix forming adjective. So dual, we know means two. So dualistic approach to non-duality. Well, non is negation. So negation of duality. So we're back to unity. Contradiction? Paradox? Unity. Let's find out. Alright. So let's get warmed up first. No questions for the audience. We've heard this before. If a tree falls in the forest, if no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? By show of hands, how many people think it does make a sound? Raise your hand. How many people, okay, thank you. How many people think it does not make a sound? Raise your hand. Okay, okay. And how many people are not sure? Anybody? Not sure? Alright, so see, we will seek to answer this question together today, amongst other questions you may have. Alright. So as I approach this idea of silence, right? You know, I'm a big word person. I love quotes, I love to read. So the first quote I came across, Mahatma Gandhi. Speak only if you improve the silence. What's the first thing that we notice here? To improve. Well, it's action of improving. To improve upon what? If you think about it, you can't improve upon something that does not exist. So it already has to be there. So off the bat, we can see that we have a baseline. Next thing to notice, in this quote, the silence. So we have a definite article. The, specific. Well, articles are attached to nouns. What is a noun? Well, in grammarians, in person linguists, what is a noun? It's three things. Anyone want to shout it out? What's a noun? It's a person.
Relative.
Yeah, exactly. A place or a thing. It's not a person? No, so it's one point. It's a place. Excuse me, silence a person too. Can you point to it? Is it a place? Well, I don't see it anymore. I've never seen it. I don't know if you have. So it's a thing. It's an object. So in this case, it's an abstract object. It's not really tangible. You can't put your hands on it, you can't touch it, but it seems to exist. So this really got me interested in the topic. Like, after this, I really wanted to learn more about this. Okay. So this is an actual screenshot that I took when I started conceptualizing this idea of silence. So the question I had in my mind at this point doesn't matter. But what I typed into Google was, how is silence? And then these were the queries that came up. How is silence used in communication? How is silence associated with knowledge? Interesting. Any musicians in the audience would appreciate this one? How is silence notated in music? How is silence powerful? How is it used in questioning and the reflective process? Well, we have another adjective forming a suffix. It's if. Alright? What type of process? Reflective, from the verb, from the verb over here to reflect. So we can start to see how we're creating words through the verb. That's another interesting thing. We create words through the verb. The verb is the action. So the action is the baseline. Okay. To reflect, to look back upon, how was the silencer made? I don't really know where that came from. How silence is viewed in different cultures. Well, that's interesting, you know. Particularly pertaining to the Gandhi quote. And finally, how is silence golden? We're not going to cover any of these, but it's interesting that there's so many different ways in which we can look at silence. So we can start to see how dynamic it is. So there's a word that I want us to think about as we're together today. And that word is potential. Say that. This word, Paul, 10. Shop. Why not hyphenated? Another adjective. From the root, potent. What is something that's potent? Anybody? Something that's potent, what is it? It's powerful. Strong. How is silence powerful? How is silence strong? It's an interesting concept. Alright, let's continue. Okay, so the first thing I did, let's define our terms. Next thing I did is look at the etymology of silence. So right off the bat, dualistic. Silence is both a noun and a verb, but it's still one thing, non-duality, simultaneously. Okay, so you can see, muteness or state of being, silent. So it's a state. It's a state of being, to be, Romanian, afi, right? Absence of sound. From Latin silentium, from silence, from celeri, to be quiet or still. There's this idea of stillness. Here it is again, absence of sound. So what's interesting is we're defining silence by what it is not. It's not sound. But why is that so important? So again, as a verb, to come still, to become silent. So we know that silence can either be a state of being or an action that we take. Right? The absence of sound, the absence of movement, the absence of action. Okay, so if we're going to define silence, then maybe it's important that we also define sound. Early 13th century, to be audible, to produce vibrations affecting what? The ear. So let's go back to our first question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, we have one. So we're going to be inclusive here. No thing to do that, right? No thing. No conscious being is without direction. If no one's around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. Well, technically it does not make a sound. You need an observer for a sound. Right? Okay, to cause something to produce sound from pi, sene, pi is Proto-Indo-European for Neo-Linguistic, right? Then to sound, so simultaneously the noun, noise, what is heard, sensation, produced through the ear. Late 13th century song, Old French song, sound, musical note, Latin, sonus, sound, a noise, pi, spano, root from, stem, to sound. Okay, so we've defined our terms now, so enough of that. Something a little more interesting. So first article came across. What creative people understand about the importance of being alone? So I'd like to ask the audience, there's a room full of creative people. How many people prefer working alone? By show of hands. Oh, okay, right here. Got a question for you. Why do you prefer working alone?
Left alone with my own thoughts so that I can order them, so I'm not interfering with my thoughts and the flow of my thoughts.
Flow. Wow, very nice flow. Any other volunteers? Show of hands again, please. Show of hands. Who wants to work alone? Anybody? Halfway in between. Step first, I bowl. Oh, now we can find out why we have a bowl full of numbers. Is there a number 29 for anyone? Does anybody have number 29 who's brave enough to raise their hand? No. We can see where we're going with the numbers, okay? Alright, now you know why we have them. I will be pulling from them, so I have no volunteers. But I'll try one more time. Anyone who enjoys working alone, could you please? Why do you enjoy working alone?
For me personally, it brings clarity and I don't want it to things.
Oh, very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you to the volunteers, I appreciate it. Okay, so let's see what the article says. So 2 interesting points that I wanted to grab from here and show you. Solitude is required for the unconscious to process and unravel problems. Okay, so unravel. So we're looking at the beginning of the words, the suffix. If you look at the beginning of the word, we have our prefix. Unravel. This idea of un, the sound, this un. Denotes negation. Right? The opposite of, or the undoing of, whatever it's attached to. Next one. Others inspire us. Information feeds us. Practice improves our performance. But we need quiet time to figure things out, to emerge with new discoveries, to unearth original answers. And all this was quoted from Esther Buchholz, a psychologist and psychoanalyst, in her book, The Call of Solitude. So it's interesting that these 3 points that I highlight. We have 1 adjective and 2 verbs. The adjective quiet, as we know, is synonymous with silence. But let's look at these 2 verbs we have. To emerge with new discoveries, to unearth original answers. The question I had when I read this was, to emerge from where? If you're familiar with this word emerge, it's coming up from somewhere. Where are these new discoveries coming up from? That's what you think about. To unearth original answers. Well, we know that un is a prefix to negation, right? To unearth, coming up from. So we can automatically get this idea of what is hidden, what is underneath, what is below, coming up. We're still not sure where it's coming up from. Now, my bias is shown here because when I look at these, quiet, to help emerge, to help unearth, I think they're the teacher. I think this is what I do day to day when I'm engaging with my learners. Is there any evidence to support this position? Right here. Deepak Chopra. Silence is a great teacher. Silence is a great teacher. To learn its lessons, you must pay attention to it. There is no substitute for the creative inspiration, knowledge, and stability that come from knowing how to contact your core in yourself. Now things start to become a little bit clearer, right? We have this idea of core. We also have this idea of to emerge from, to unearth. Are they emerging from our core? Are we unearthing these ideas, this creative process from within us? Could this possibly be the benefit of silence for us? To help us bring out what is already within us. Something interesting. All right, so let's continue. So these are all just nice words, but is there any real world applicability to these concepts? Well, I believe there is. And apparently, so do more schools. So here's an article I found from The Guardian. How too much of mindfulness can calm class and boost attainment. We definitely will not go through the whole article today. We don't have time. But some key points. Mindfulness helps students cope with academic stress and picture the pressures of life. The article sought to examine the benefits of silent reflection on education. Key point down below, a daily dose of silent reflection can help students calm the classroom and may improve academic performance. And what's interesting on the right, neuroscientists have found that this long-term practice of mindfulness alters the structure and function of the brain to improve the quality of both thought and feeling. So I have another question to the audience. How many people practice mindfulness? How many people incorporate mindfulness into their daily practice? Right, your hands up, hands up. Why?
Because I enjoy silence and I feel like it calms me a lot because I'm a very stress-prone person and I get stressed very easily, so it helps me calm down and get back to it.
Nice, thank you very much. Anybody else? Here.
It helps me a lot to realize what I'm feeling at the moment because sometimes we do stuff and we don't ask ourselves what is it that's going on inside of me, and when we realize I'm stressed and calm and grounded, it's very helpful to keep on doing things with a feeling of knowing what is going on.
Last one, that's a bad day. Last one too.
I do it because I think it's important to be mindful of whatever we're doing. So even if it's a feeling or it's an action or if it's something that I don't know happens through the day, it's important to be mindful of that thing and not just do it because of whatever.
Thank you for your answers. So let's look at this word mindfulness for a second. All right, so mindfulness can actually be broken up into obviously, there are roots mind, where this idea of full, this following suffix ness. So you have our root mind, where the adjective creating suffix full. This is actually a noun. So we can actually then turn back into a noun, ness. Now what's interesting is both full as an adjective and ness as a noun, both denote the quality of something. Now, this mindful, take away the mess, this mindful, you can actually look at it as being full of blank. You don't believe me? Here's another one. Look at the word beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, obviously, you don't know this, you all decide. Full beauty. That's how this full as a suffix works. Alright, next part. One of the most useful ways of practicing mindfulness is to take a very short pause in the middle of wherever you're doing. And you just focus on that breath. Once you do that, here you are, right here. The past doesn't exist because you can't point to it, you can't show it. Abstract, there's a future from that concept. But I can see right here. I can see right now. I'm in my mind. Through awareness. But all this is happening and coming from the silence or through the silence. Look right now. All right, let's do that. So, this is qualitative, right? This is a qualitative approach. For any of the more hardcore, quantitative, nuts and bolts people in the room, maybe you think this is just circumstantial, anecdotal information. Okay, well, come on. Can we get quantitative about this? Another article I found, Biology, Neuroscience. This is your brain on silence. Down below, tag, contrary to popular belief, peace and quiet is all about the noise in your head. What does that mean? Right? Maybe there is a science to it. It's a very long article. I actually found it very interesting. You can Google this title, read more about it. Two key points I pulled out of it. Dr. N.K. Christie, she found that 2 hours of silence per day prompted cell development in the hippocampus of the brain. The brain region, this is related to the formation of memory involving the senses. Now here's an interesting thing. The studies that were talked about in this article, scientists were never studying silence. Silence was used as a baseline to study the effects of noise on our brain. And what they found was that silence had a bigger, longer, and larger impact on our brain, on our memory, than auditory sensations, external auditory sensations. Another doctor, Dr. Marcus, if I pronounce this correctly, Rachel, he and his team, I believe from the University of Washington, what they found was that in silence, our brains have a default mode function. And their conclusion was that the resting brain is perpetually active, gathering and evaluating information, but that this works best in silence, and that there's an inverse relationship that's going on here. Inverse relationship being the higher the level of cognition or cognitive process, when we're thinking really hard, other aspects of our brain shut down, neurologically. But that within silence, in the resting state, our default mode activates, and this may be the reason why the creative process benefits so much from silence. Because we're gathering information, we're collating information, and we're putting it in an order that we can understand. But that cannot happen with too much sensory input. What this group also found was that this default mode setting allows us to what they termed as self-reflection, where the external, and the internal meet together as one. Right? Where we take the information from the outside world, we're process it internally. And this is where the synthesis takes place. Right? But all of this again is happening in silence. Right? So you can start to see the potential of silence. And I'll go back to it again. It's not by chance that the root of potential is total. What else we got here? So this is great information, right? This is cutting edge information. The last few years, this has been in the 21st century. Why is no one noticed it? Why is this the first we're hearing of this? If it's so beneficial and impactful for us. Or actually, it's not. You've always known about this. This is a quote from a Bengali Hindu yogi by the name of Paramahansa Yogananda. Is anybody familiar with Yogi Yogananda? This word Bengali? Yeah? Have you either you read or familiar with the book he read? Oh, tell us about it. Okay, so the book, he read a very, I guess, popular book called Autobiography of a Yogi. Can you please tell us one thing that you took away from the book?
That we are capable of anything. Like we don't know how much we can do with our brain.
I would agree. So the quote itself, through the portals of opening or doorway, through the portals of silence, the healing sun of wisdom and peace will shine upon you. Well, obviously, this is very flowery, poetic speech, very metaphorical. But is it useful at all? Well, there's one person who found it was useful. A gentleman by the name of Steve Jobs. And he's on record as saying that this book that Yogi Yogananda wrote, the Autobiography of a Yogi, was one of the most important and impactful books he had ever read in his whole entire life. And he kept it with him everywhere he went. So, these phones we have in our pockets, this worldwide connectivity that we can largely attribute to this gentleman, Steve Jobs, was highly influenced by this gentleman, who was extolling the virtues and benefits of silence. What's better? So we can see the beneficial impacts of it. So does that mean everyone does it? Does that mean we're all comfortable with silence? Another question. Who here, if we're being honest, is sometimes a little bit uncomfortable when it's quiet? Okay, we're going back in a second. I'll go front and I'll go back. Why does silence sometimes possibly make you uncomfortable?
Well, usually when I'm in a group of people and it's quiet, I feel very awkward and I'm trying to boost the conversation or start talking because I just feel awkward, quite awkward. And I'm trying to start a conversation or something like that. I'm a talkative person, so.
In the back, I saw some hands in the back. I apologize for coming back here more often.
Says like that, being alone feels like a problem that needs to be solved. Sometimes.
Have you ever dealt with problems?
Yes.
Wow.
Not anyone. Working on it.
Anybody else in the back? I'll give you guys the attention. Sure. All right.
Why do you feel that silence is uncomfortable? Well, when we're with a group of people, silence is usually uncomfortable because I think everybody expects the other one to say something. But when we're alone with ourselves, I think it's important to deal with that difficulty and dependent to love our space.
She's a very interesting word for space. Right? Now, both people mentioned silence in a group. So, follow-up question before I continue. Is anyone ever feeling comfortable when they're alone, in silence? Okay, I'll come to Steph in a second. Thanks, Steph. Oh, over here.
I have to answer why I'm
Possibly when we're alone, and if a feeling of uncomfort arises in silence, why do you think that might be? Or where do you think that might come from?
Personally, I don't feel uncomfortable, but I think that some person feel this because they're not okay with themselves and they're not able to fit in the face within themselves. So they have to be patient with them and try to listen them themselves and also try to understand themselves.
Thank you very much. Nice stuff from coming. Call for it.
Basically because I'm facing the chaos of thoughts and feelings, and I'm aware I need to work on that. And also, in addition, is because I'm facing myself, and that can be scary sometimes.
Facing yourself, interesting point. Okay, we refer back to earlier. Reflection process. Reflective. Different color. I erased it, so I'll write it again. Don't take a look. Don't take a look. Alright, so we have the reflection process, noun, suffix forming noun. The ability to be reflective, suffix forming adjective. But again, all of these come to the verb. Back or again, is prefix. What reflects? Mirror reflection. What are we mirroring? So what is it that we want to look at? What is it that makes us feel so uncomfortable that a 2014 research study found that people would rather administer electric shocks to themselves than be led along with their thoughts? This is actually true. You can Google the article. It'll hyperlink you to Science Magazine, and there you can find more information on this. Now, surprisingly enough, okay, let's be honest here, fellas. They found that this is happening mostly with men. I don't know why. I have more answers to this. But it was happening amongst everybody. So both genders, male and female. But a large percentage of men were willing to accept physical pain over emotional pain. So, fellas, are we not really in touch with ourselves in that way? I don't know. Sherry Turkle, founder of MIT Initiative on Technology and Self. Interesting quote here. The moment that people are alone, even for a few seconds, they become anxious, panic, fidget, move around. And they reach for a device. Being alone feels like a problem that needs to be solved, as you mentioned in the back. Do we have an example of this? All right. So we're uncomfortable with ourselves inside. But, like you said, you see what you said in a second. I think the answer might be because silence is one of the hardest arguments to refute. To refute means to deny. How can you argue? How can we argue with that which comes up in our own thoughts when we're alone? So again, we're getting back to this how dynamic and how much potential is in silence. So it may not necessarily be entirely positive, but it's clearly not entirely negative. It just is. Right? And the power that it holds can go in either direction, depending on the observer. Okay, but back to the point that you made. When we're uncomfortable in the silence of others, is it just the physical proximity of others that makes us uncomfortable? Well, clearly there isn't. Because we've all experienced this. The article itself doesn't matter. We're not even going to the article. But it's the concept itself. Because we've all experienced this, and we've all done it. We've all been left on red. And we all leave people on red. Right? Now it's interesting. I was looking after reading this article, and apparently this is a problem in the digital age. I went to trusty Urban Dictionary. No, it's right there with Wikipedia. And the first definition of left on red, the highest level of disrespect a human can receive. All right, so here's my question to us. Okay. How many people would agree with this? It may not be the highest, but maybe top 3. How many people would agree with this concept? To be left on scenes even worse. Okay. Would this still fall in the top 3 though? It's not me. Okay. So, here's the question. Why does it bother us when somebody does not respond to us?
In my opinion, it's because it's the lack of empathy. You don't know what to do, it's uncertainty. It's also.
Continue.
So, this is my opinion. I mean, when you send a message to someone, you expect an answer, and when you don't receive it, you don't know what's happening, you don't know how to act, because you don't have the input, you don't know what's your next step, basically.
Because we could potential, hold on mic for a second. We could potentially adverb creating suffix. They could potentially feel any way about whatever it is that we sent to them. Right? I would agree. Anybody else?
So besides the uncertainty, I think is that people sometimes make up scenarios of why they were left unseen and why the other person would not respond. I think that's even worse when they are uncertain, but they make up their own scenarios, which may not be true or right. So.
I would agree. So to finish this off, it may be helpful to know that this is not just a problem of the modern age. If anybody's familiar with the Sufi poet Mawlana Rumi, he had a large impact on my life. So here's one of his quotes. He's the 13th century, so it's not recent. In the 13th century, here's the quote here. Why are you so afraid of silence? Silence is the root of everything. If you spiral into its void, 100 voices will thunder messages you long to hear. Okay. So, with that idea in mind, as we go off to our busy days, into the loud and crazy world, let's just take a second. Now we go. There we go. Let's just take a second together as a group. Let's just listen to the silence. Because apparently, it has so much to say.